It's WrestlePod, the Truepenny Show, with your host, James Truepenny.
Hello and welcome to the Truepenny Show. My name is James Truepenny. This is my show, and welcome to part 11 of the Beginner's Guide to Japanese Wrestling, which is slightly disconcerting for me and my guest today because we haven't recorded part 10 yet.
We're in the future.
We are in the future, and to join me in the future is Mr. Alex Edwards. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me.
That's okay. I appreciate your time this afternoon. I hope you've been well.
Have been, yeah, just watching a lot of old school Japanese wrestling and randomly American stuff, as we're about to find out about.
Yeah, well, today's episode is a look at a show that happened in All Japan Pro Wrestling and New Japan, kind of, but it was really more of an All Japan thing with a lot of WWE stuff going on at the time in 1990, which was called Wrestling Summit, which occurred in the Egg Dome on the 13th of April 1990. Now, as we move forward in the Beginner's Guide to Japan series, we're kind of going to look at everything from this point onwards, one super show at a time, because this is the era of the super show. This is the era of the pay-per-view. This is the era of the arena-filling massiveness of Japanese wrestling. So we want to give you an in-depth kind of review, and then we can point you in the direction, because these shows mostly are available one place or another on the old internet. You can either buy them on DVD, or you can find them on streaming services, or you can find them in most places, really. So we thought we'd start with this show because this was probably the most interesting show of the early 90s as far as interpromotional stuff that was going on, the way the WWE was reacting to the Japanese promotions at the time, how big the Japanese promotions were at the time, and the fact that you got All Japan, New Japan, and the WWF all working together at the same time, which would never happen now.
Yeah, it's a bit of a ridiculous idea, really, isn't it? That you have WWF, arguably at that time, the peak of the company, then All Japan and New Japan, who, I mean, we've been over the history of those two promotions and the sort of the bad blood between them at the start, and somehow they've all come together to promote one massive show together in the Tokyo Dome. It's a bit crazy. And yeah, like you said, it's something that, just imagine today if WWE, New Japan, and I don't know, AAA all did one big show all together. It would be, you wouldn't even be able to think about it being a thing. It's crazy to think about.
Yeah, it was quite special at the time. Now, the three companies, when you consider who went onto this card, were gearing up to be at their most productive peaks, arguably. Well, certainly All Japan and New Japan were. You know, All Japan were building to the King's Road style and its peak period in the early to mid 1990s. New Japan Pro Wrestling second generation, you know, Shinya Hashimoto, Keiji Muto, and Masachono were just coming back to the promotion to start their big run at stardom in New Japan, which is going to fill arenas for the next 10 years. And the WWF have still got Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior and Macho Man Randy Savage and Ted DiBiase, arguably their four biggest draws of the 80s, and they still all can go. So this is probably the three biggest companies in the world at their peak and their peak creatively, which kind of like makes you think, why did they have to rely on each other?
I don't know. Yeah, partly that, and partly, I guess, it's just weird to think about them all. As you said, if they are all at their peak creatively, talent-wise, and everything, why would they feel the need to work together, like you said? And two, I just can't believe that there wasn't some sort of political thing that stopped this from happening. Like, I can just imagine especially when you get into sort of interpromotional matches, you have like, oh, well, I don't want my guy to lose, and I just can't believe they managed to pull through that and put this show on, and it was such a success.
Well, it is noticeable that the WWE guys only wrestled All Japan guys. They didn't wrestle New Japan guys.
Right.
So, and New Japan guys wrestled New Japan guys. They didn't wrestle anybody else. So maybe that's the first clue. Background was, okay, now, I'll be honest with you, I don't know a lot about the politics of this card. I know a bit about the politics of the card, but mainly later on in the card, and we'll get to that as we come to it. But other than that, I mean, you look at these matches, and there's some good WWE guys on here, and there's some good All Japan guys on here. There is not a match that goes longer than 20 minutes, because there was one match which is a 20-minute time limit draw, which we'll get to. But and it's not a great wrestling card. It's definitely not remembered as a great wrestling card, but it's kind of important because of all the stuff we just talked about. It's about politics and about the confidence of the Japanese wrestling companies at the time. We can go to the Tokyo Dome and we can fill it. Because let's point this out, All Japan had not gone to the Tokyo Dome before, and they wouldn't ordinarily have gone to the Tokyo Dome. They would much rather have gone to Sumo Hall and Budokan Hall, jacked up the ticket prices and made a lot of money off a smaller crowd. And then made the money back on TV rights. Because that's the way they worked, and they were quite happy to do that. New Japan had gone to the Tokyo Dome a couple of times at this point. They were old hands, and that's maybe the reason why Giant Baba thought he needed New Japan on board to show them how to do the big dome stuff. And the WWF really hadn't been a strong presence in Japan for quite some time. I mean, the WWF champion, as we discussed in earlier episodes of the Beginner's Guide, was considered a very big title through its New Japan Association in the 1980s, but New Japan and WWF hadn't really associated together for a good, 1985? So a good 5 years.
That was going to be one of my sort of first questions for you, because I'm guessing you'll know more about this than me. But one, had WWF at the time, had they promoted their own individual shows in Japan at all, or
no,
was it only stuff like this where it was sort of a joint show with another Japanese promotion?
They'd only ever done joint stuff with the Japanese promotion, so they were really tight with Antonio Inoki and the New Japan Pro Wrestling in the 1970s and the early 1980s. Obviously, the cross-promotional stuff that you saw there with the WWF Junior Heavyweight Championship in New Japan Pro Wrestling, and with the WWF Championship being defended regularly on New Japan cards in the 1970s and certainly up to the 1980s. So this is the first time that WWF have really kind of gone with a full crew even. Usually they'd send the champion over or a couple of guys. But, this does lead on to a lot of stuff for WWF in Japan. But, at this particular point, it's still a bit of an anomaly. It just kind of falls into place. Now, I know the card was negotiated between Vince McMahon and Giant Baba, which must have been some interesting conversation.
Yeah, I can imagine. Did Baba speak English?
I'm not sure, but I think Tokyo Joe Higuchi was the go-between.
Interpreter. Okay.
Yeah, he was often the go-between with All Japan and American companies. I know when David Von Erich died on his Japanese tour, he was the person that rang the Dallas office to explain what had happened. So he was often seen, as much as the way Tiger Hattori is seen these days, as the talent relations for Gaijin talent and North American talent, because Tiger Hattori lives in New York. So he's seen as, the guy. And I think Tiger Hattori actually started out as an All Japan referee, if I remember correctly, believe it or not.
You got all these crossovers as you go back to this time period.
Yeah, you have indeed. So shall we have a look at match by match?
Let's do it.
Okay then. So the opening match, which Alex has not been able to find, so we'll kind of got to brush over this, but let's look at the people in this match. Dan Crockett and Doug Furnas, the Can-Am connection, along with Joe Malenko, defeat Samson Fuyuki, Tatsumi Kitahara, and Toshiaki Kawada in 11 minutes and 56 seconds. Now, Don Crockett and Doug Furnas were perennial All-Asian Tag Team champions. They were exceptionally good. They were signed not long after by the WWE as Dan Crockett and Doug Furnas and Phil Lafon, because they wouldn't use Dan Crockett's name.
Anywho, they would Doug Furnas.
Sorry?
But they would Doug Furnas.
But they would
Doug
Furnas.
Which is a bit of a weird one.
Yeah, strange. Furnas and Lafon. Very good tag team that never really went anywhere. And Joe Malenko, who obviously has a slightly more famous younger brother, but Joe was really, really good. Exceptionally good wrestler. And they defeated Samson Fuyuki, Tatsumi Kitahara, and a young man called Toshiaki Kawada, who has a major influence on All Japan.
Yeah, he went on to do a little something.
He was quite good. as Alex Watt would say. So there's an awful lot of star power, or at least future star power, at the bottom of this card.
Yeah, which I guess it shows that when you have sort of the three biggest promotions in the world at that point putting on a show all together, there's only room for stars on the show. Like, when you think about, you've got the full rosters of all of them and you want to get all your top guys on. Once you've got all your top guys on, there's not really much room for anyone else. And so you are left with like an opening match with all these massive names in it. And it's weird to see when you see it on paper, but if you look at the whole card and the sort of star power we get into as we go further up the card, it makes more sense.
Yeah, and especially as you go on to the next match. The next match is Jushin Thunder Liger, who is just started to be recognized as the ace of the junior heavyweight division in New Japan. And he's wrestling Akira Nagami. He's a technical wrestler. Again, another New Japan guy. So it's a New Japan guy versus a New Japan guy. This is their contribution to the card, and they've given them two of their biggest and best workers, and they have a match of 8 minutes and 37 seconds. So that was interesting.
One of the longer matches on the show.
Yeah. Again, but it's nothing to write home about, is it? So, this card does seem to like have a certain, how can I put this, lack of, doesn't stick in the mind.
I guess it's more of the spectacle of it being in the Tokyo Dome with a packed crowd and seeing all these stars in such a weird environment, I guess. Like, when you look at guys like Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage, you don't really think of them as being these massive stars in Japan.
No.
And then you see them walk out in the Tokyo Dome and get these massive reactions, and it's a bit weird to see, but it's cool at the same time.
Yeah, this is interesting, and this next match, which is the first American versus Japanese match of this particular card, Jimmy Snuka and Tito Santana defeated Kenta Kobashi and Masanobu Fuchi. That's an interesting match. Now, Kobashi was in the middle, with the beginning of his big run to the top of the company. He was still losing on a regular basis. And Masanobu Fuchi, who was about the same age, a little bit older, I think, at the time, who was a junior heavyweight who managed to pattern himself after the Dynamite Kid to the nth degree. was Dynamite actually kind of, it was one of Dynamite's proteges as well. Dynamite looked after him when he was in All Japan Pro Wrestling, and Fuchi in return looked after Dynamite as Dynamite's skills and body started to fail him. And they had a run at the All Asian Tag Team Championships, if I remember correctly, and they had that cracking match with Furnas and Crawford that was I think it was a 5-star match, and it was match of the year in Japan, in Fuchi's hometown. So they were a cracking tag team. And then Snooker and Santana, who obviously don't tag together at all, and which, of course, as you mentioned, the recently deceased Jimmy Snooker, as we're recording this, he passed away this week. We'll not talk about anything else. But what's really interesting about this match, and what blows my mind, is essentially Jimmy Snooker and Tito Santana are working heel against Kobashi and Fuchi.
Yeah, which was strange, because you always think of Jimmy Snuka as one of the sort of massive 80s baby faces, and here he is as the sort of veteran heel against, which is also really weird to see, sort of a young boy Kobashi.
Yeah.
It's just odd. It made for a good match, though, and Kobashi and Fuchi you could see that they would go on to do great things. Like, there was a lot of sort of really impressive, fast-paced, high-flying action, which you wouldn't really expect to see from someone like Kenta Kobashi with all the sort of top rope crossbodies and stuff. But no, I thought this made for a decent match.
Yeah, and I've never seen Tito Santana work heel, ever. I knew this was like, it wasn't really working heel. It was kind of subtle heel, but it's still like,
it was more sort of heel by default, just because they were against Japanese guys.
This was a switch. Now, Kobashi at the time, the fans were kind of really gathering behind him because he had this massive losing streak. This is one of the odd things about Japanese wrestling. Like, Kobashi at the time was being booked by Giant Baba on a massive losing streak.
So I think I read during research for this that he lost his first 63 matches or something like that.
Yeah, and he got better, and the matches went longer, and he had better competition, but he still didn't win. And that was the Baba way. You slowly build this following for a guy with loads of heart. You know, and that's why Kobashi is widely seen as the heart and soul of All Japan, and then Noah much later on, because he never ever gave up, even though he lost 63 matches in a row. You know, so that's part of his persona, really. You know, and yeah, 8 minutes 28 seconds was a cracking little match for what it was. A bit strange, mind.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit strange seeing Snooker and Santana as heels, even though Snooker was getting big pops, even though he was sort of slightly playing heel.
Yeah.
It was, the crowd didn't quite react, I think, how they wanted them to.
Yeah.
But I don't know. When you I don't know. It's just, it turned out well, and it was a fun match.
Then you do notice in this match as well, there's no end of Americans in this pockets of them.
That was something I noticed in a couple of the matches, was they kept cutting to crowd shots where you'd have these like groups of Americans going crazy, and I'm wondering how many Americans actually flew out to Tokyo for this show. Because this isn't a show that is really spoken about too much anymore. No. And I'd heard of it, but never really looked into it at all until this podcast. And I'm wondering if at the time, was it a sort of massively well-promoted thing where a lot of Americans were traveling out to watch it? Or was it sort of just treated as sort of like a house show sort of thing? Like, oh, by the way, we're in Japan.
I think that pretty much it, because it was ignored on WWE television.
Right.
Because obviously, like, there is no context for this. Because if you were trying to, like, there's a reason why there's one title match on this, isn't there? There's just one title match on this show, because you'd have to introduce all these people. And that's really hard. Yeah, this is really... Yeah, it was kind of ignored. And when we get to the main events later on, there's a bit more political explaining as why it didn't really get promoted that well. I'm wondering how many people... I mean, obviously there were still... I'm not sure when the US withdrew from Japan entirely, militarily. So there may have been, military personnel living in Japan and in that area, though judging by those mullets, it wouldn't have been military personnel who was attending. So, yeah.
The one guy who later on will like rip off his Hogan shirt and spends about 5 minutes trying to get it off before holding it above his head, screaming. I'm not sure he doesn't look like a military man.
No. Intriguing. Anywho. Yeah, so we'll move on to the next match, which was Bret Hart versus Tiger Mask. Now, this is not the Tiger Mask we talked about, who had the feud with the Dynamite Kid and went on to help form UWF. This is Tiger Mask 2, Masahiro Misawa, who was really very, very good and showing how great he could be in All Japan Pro Wrestling, but as a junior heavyweight. You know, he had not... The junior heavyweight style in All Japan is slightly different to New Japan. It's kind of like a smaller guy's heavyweight style. And Misawa was one of the leading lights of that. He did an awful lot of things that Satoru Sayama, the original Tiger Mask, did, as you would try and carry on some of the moveset. But he was really thinking very differently about how to get this character over. Now, he's wrestling Bret Hart, who obviously was part of the original Tiger Mask feud, so that's going to pique some interest for Japanese fans. Mm-hmm. But this match, by all accounts, and I've seen it, and it's all right, but it's pretty much a standard Bret Hart match. It's not as good as it should be, is it?
No, I found this one a bit disappointing. Like, when you see it on paper, especially at this time period, so this show happened in 1990, so that's Bret Hart really coming into his own, and then Misawa, like, as you said, starting out in the junior division, but still, it's Mitsuharu Misawa as Tiger Mask, so surely it must be great, right? But it was okay, and there was some flashes of some really cool stuff in there. Like, there was a lot of, like, for example, Tiger Mask hitting a big plunger to the outside, and there was some cool, like, one bit where he feigned a dive to the outside and then did sort of a backflip back into the ring, and it looked cool. And there was stuff like that where you can see it sort of in today's cruiserweight style of wrestling, and you can see where they got this sort of stuff from. But then alongside that, there was sort of 90% of the match was rest holds. And I'm wondering if it's because they did go to a 20-minute draw, I'm wondering how much of that was sort of pacing themselves to make sure they could actually go 20 minutes, and how much of it could have been them not wanting to sort of give away too much too early in the show. Yeah. And so they sort of held back a bit so that the later matches in the show could have more shine. I don't know, it seemed a lot slower than I would have expected, and the finish sort of fell very flat.
Yeah, this was it was just not. I mean, it's one of the criticisms I've read online is that it was Brett. If the other person in the match with Brett didn't want to do what Brett wanted to do, Brett wasn't that interested.
Right. Okay.
And I can see that because it's a very standardized kind of Brett style match of the time period. But again, it's hard to quantify this fact that when you think in about 2 years' time, or 3 years' time, I should say, these two people will be the highest paid wrestlers in the industry.
Yeah. So it's like you see that, and then you're like, surely this must be the best match in the world. And it's just not. It's
all right. And a lot of this show is it's all right, and we kind of like, it's one of those things that, like, we talk about these mythical cards like Money in the Bank 2011, which wasn't a great gate draw, but had this mythically wonderful match between CM Punk and John Cena. And that was something that WWE were going to build upon eventually. You'd have Cena versus Punk again, and you could go back and reference that match in the past. This is one of those where I think that was the idea, but it just didn't work.
Right. Okay.
It seems like it. It seems like there's some cool moments in this. There's some stuff that's really got potential to be really, really great, like Bret Hart versus Tiger Mask, but it just never comes off.
Yeah. And I mean, the crowd really loved it, except for the finish. And that was something, especially as we get later into the show, the crowd was insane. Like, they were so hot for just everything. But I think they may have just been excited to see sort of these WWF stars and then sort of these sort of dream matches they didn't think they'd ever get to see. Rather than sort of cheering for what was actually happening in the ring. Yeah,
no, I understand that, yes. Right then, we move on to the next match, which featured two guys who like hitting people really, really hard, which we always appreciate on the Truepenny Show, which was the Great Kabuki, who defeated Greg the Hammer Valentine in 7 minutes and 18 seconds. I'm watching this match because I watched it again recently with this podcast in mind, and I just forgot how good Greg Valentine is.
That's something that really stood out to me as well. He's such a good heel.
Yeah.
Like, even down to on Kabuki's entrance, where Kabuki spits the mist into the air, and it cuts to like Greg Valentine's face, and he just looks disgusted. And it's just that one look on his face tells the story for the whole match of him just thinking, who is this guy and why am I having to fight him? And he really plays off that throughout, where he'll get an advantage and he'll milk it, and he'll sort of jeer the crowd, and really sort of like, he doesn't take Kabuki seriously at all. And then you get to the finish where, again, he spends too long gloating, goes for a figure four and just gets rolled up and pinned. And it's simple but good storytelling.
Yeah, and these two would be very familiar with each other. I mean, Kabuki had his learning excursion in Japan. He was wrestling Boogie Woogie Man Jimmy Valiant in Jim Crockett Promotions in 1983 on the first Starrcade show when Valentine wrestled Roddy Piper. So they were very familiar with each other's work. And in 7 minutes and 18 seconds, though it wasn't going to tear trees up, was an incredibly serviceable, well put together match.
That 7 minutes and 18 seconds is the thing that also stood out to me. It felt like this match could have gone a little bit longer. It felt like it was just sort of missing, like, Kabuki sold basically for the entire match, and there wasn't really any sort of moment of him getting to do anything and make himself look good.
Yeah.
He sort of sold, then rolled him up for the win. And I would have liked to see maybe an extra 5 minutes of Kabuki actually gets on the offense and does some cool stuff. But then again, that's a theme for the whole show, like we've said, where everything does go a little bit short.
Yeah, I mean, well, to be honest with you, if you like, Kabuki and Valentine need 45 minutes to get going.
That's true.
Valentine once said, if I could beat on somebody long enough, we could have a pretty good match. That was basically
I guess he tried to fit in as much beating down as he could.
Yeah. You know, that's how he described the match with Piper. He said, if we just could hit each other for a very long time, it would turn out okay. Yeah.
I mean, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah, it's not a bad philosophy when you're a guy who's a cardio machine like Valentine was, you know, and you look at, like, his dad was Johnny Valentine, who was a massive draw in Canada, massive draw in the Carolinas, massive draw in the AWA. His best friend growing up in the business was Ric Flair. He wrestled Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood every week for months on end. Valentine was one of those guys. Valentine's one of those guys that you just need in a wrestling company. He's one of those sort of solid guys that you can just put out there to have a good match, and he will have a good match no matter what night it is. Yeah, and Kabuki was probably the All Japan equivalent of that. You know, he was a guy who was a very experienced, well-rounded, lots of long learning excursions in North America, knew how to make a character work, was managed by Gary Hart for a long, long period of time, so knew how to book a match and make it sense. And he learnt. You know, he was the catalyst for the Kieiji Muto, the Great Muta character, a couple of years later. So yeah, Kabuki was the guy, and Kabuki actually is very important to the story of this particular card and what happens after this card. But we'll get to that at the end of this card, because we're getting into wrestling politics here, and we're trying to get through the matches first. And the next thing was Jake the Snake Roberts versus the Big Boss Man in a pretty standard WWE TV match of 1990. To be honest, perfectly serviceable, didn't do anything bad, wasn't particularly great. It was a Jake Roberts match.
Pretty much, it was all very simple. Heel gets the advantage, babyface comes back, gets the win. But it was fun, and the crowd loved it. The crowd really liked Jake, and I thought the finish was cool with Bossman going for the big sort of body slam, and Jake jumps out of it and slips behind him and gets a DDT. It was really sort of smooth and nicely done. And yeah, I think this was a showcase for Bossman to really show how much of a big man he was, how much of a good big man he was, and how that sort of wrestling style and character can transcend language barriers, and no matter where you are in the world, it'll work, and you'll instantly get over as the bad guy no matter what country you're in. And it worked here perfectly, and yeah, it was a good little match.
And Jake Roberts as well, you forget how over the DDT was.
Definitely, especially at this time, yeah.
You know, I mean, you see 5 DDTs in a match these days. I know I sound very old school and Jim Cornette and boring, but you do see 5 DDTs in a match these days, and it's nowhere near a finisher. But back then, it was damn dangerous thing. That's what it stood for, and it was the reason why, Roberts was so over, because it's so sudden as well, and the way he delivers it. No one's delivered a DDT like Jake Roberts ever has.
It looked great, and I guess that suddenness is sort of, it was like the RKO of the time, where one of the interesting things about Randy Orton matches is that he'll always find a different way to get into the RKO, and Jake was the same with the DDT, where, as I said, in this match, he had a cool sort of transition out of a body slam into the DDT.
Yeah.
And he always found an interesting way to get into that move, and it always looked really good.
Yeah, and that, I mean, it's a good lesson as well for wrestlers who are like looking for finishes. A finisher needs to be able to be put on anywhere, anytime. You know,
like the perfect finisher can be done to anyone of any size at any time.
Yeah, you know, like it's Kazuchika Okada's Rainmaker is probably the best example we've got going now. You know, it can be done by anyone to anyone.
Yeah.
So, but yes, anyway, moving on. The IWGP Tag Team title match. So we've got a New Japan match, but again, it's a New Japan team versus a New Japan a New Japan team versus a New Japan team. Masa Saito and Shinya Hashimoto were IWGP Tag Team champions at the time, which is a damn good team, isn't it? Masa Saito and Shinya Hashimoto. Good Lord. Versus Masahiro Chono and Riki Chosu. There you go. 13 minutes of these 4 kicking the shit out of each other. What more could you want?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I'd got to see it. This was one of the ones that I couldn't find online, and so
Yeah, this is a pattern we found. Like with the New Japan stuff, has not been available online. We don't know if there's legal clearance for that, which I assume there is. But there's all sorts of odd things, people turning up. Like WCW shows appear on the WCW shows that appear on the network have New Japan guys on them, and that's fine. New Japan haven't complained to WWE about that, but presumably they haven't got the rights for it. And that was part of the WCW deal. I don't know.
Yeah, it's all sort of weird contractual stuff that I don't think we want to get into at this time.
No, and then perhaps one of the bizarrest tag team matches on this card, or certainly one of the bizarrest matches I've ever come across, to be honest with you. Jumbo Tsuruta and Haku defeat Mr. Perfect, Kate Hennig, and Rick Martel. Now, I'll be honest, there's 4 of the best wrestlers in the world, anytime. But what's really weird about it is Haku, is wrestling as a face, and I've never seen Haku wrestle as a face, ever, the born heel. He's wrestling his Heenan family partner, because the Heenan family was still on the go, Kurt Hennig, which shows you how very little Vince McMahon cared about the booking of this show.
Yeah, and I guess that sort of explains why it was just sort of ignored by the WWF sort of storylines at the time. It was just sort of never mentioned.
So you've got Kurt Hennig and Rick the Model Martel, or Mr. Perfect and Rick Martel, in having a barrel of laughs being a heel tag team, and Jumbo Tsuruta and King Haku, who clearly never teamed together before in their lives, but they have a cracking match, and of course, the fans love Tsuruta.
Yeah, that was the thing that really stood out, is how over Tsuruta was and how crazy the crowd went anytime he did anything. Just like, all you'd have to do is come in, hit a punch or something, and the crowd would go crazy. He'd put his arm up in the air, the crowd would go crazy. It was just crazy how over he was to this crowd. And I thought Perfect and Martel made a really good team. I really enjoyed them as that heel tag team. Yeah. I think there was a lot of just little things they did that were really good. And when they're up against someone as over as Tsuruta, it worked. It really worked, and it made for a good match.
I was trying to think back to see if they ever tagged in the AWA, but thinking about it, Martel was a face when Hennig was a heel in their run in the AWA, so they probably wouldn't have tagged together, but they were just that good at the job.
That was something else weird I noticed in this as well. So the commentary in this match, obviously it was all in Japanese, so I didn't know what they were saying, but it sounded like they were talking about Rick Martel and the AWA Championship. Yes. And I was wondering what that was about.
The AWA Championship was defended on New Japan cards, and it was defended on All Japan cards. It was the time of the talent swap agreement between All Japan and the AWA. I know just before then, maybe 2 years before then, Kurt Hennig had defended the AWA Heavyweight Championship against Mitsuhiro Misawa as Tiger Mask, because I've seen that match, and it's really, really good. As you'd expect, because it didn't have all the trappings of this super card. We've got to do it. It was a main event and it rocked. I think it was at Sumo Hall, and it was exceptionally good. And Nick Bockwinkel quite often defended the AWA Championship in All Japan. And, of course, obviously, Masasaito? Masasaito challenged for the AWA title a lot as well, but he was a New Japan guy. So, yeah, there was a lot of things. It wasn't long after this that New Japan and the New Japan and the AWA had a talent swap agreement, because that was the next Tokyo Dome show. Battle Force? I think it was that year's Tokyo Dome show where Larry Zbyszko defended against Masasaito. Maybe the year before. So the Japanese commentators would be very aware of the the AWA association in Japan, and they were liable to talk about it. And of course, they weren't limited to talking about companies in North America that weren't just WWF, if you see what I mean.
And that's another weird political thing that I would have thought Vince would have said to them, like, don't mention anyone but us. Yeah. But I don't know, apparently not.
Well, Nick Bockwinkel was a road agent for them at this time, if I remember correctly. Yeah, Nick Bockwinkel was a road agent on the European tour the year before, where Don Morocco got fired. It was the time of the AWA was slowly but surely hitting the skids. But there was certainly still the remembrance. And obviously Stan Hansen was an AWA champion around this time as well. Yeah, I think it was 89. Yeah. So, yeah. So there was still a lot of memory of that and a lot of good memories for as far as Japanese fans were concerned of the AWA.
Okay.
So that's probably the reason why they were talking about it. But the next match was a very interesting match, and I thoroughly enjoyed this match, and I argue it's probably the second best match on the card. Genichiro Tenryu defeated Randy Savage, who was, of course, managed by the wonderful, sensational Cherry, in 10 minutes and 49 seconds. And it's kind of hard when you look at these last 2 or 3 matches, like the tag team match before this. Jumbo Saruta's no longer with us, Kurt Hennig's no longer with us, Randy Savage and Sensational Cherry are no longer with us. It's a bit sad, really. But this match was really, really good. 10 minutes and 49 seconds. And Tenryu wins. And you see how massively over Tenryu is and what a great heel Randy Savage was.
Yeah, I'd argue this was actually the best match on the show. I really, really enjoyed this match. Just from Savage being just such a perfect heel, just to the point where right from the start, he comes in and gets cheered as he's making his entrance, but then as the bell rings, he just instantly gets out of the ring and is like, nah, I'm not doing this. And instantly the crowd hates him. And throughout the rest of the match, he's great as that cocky sort of, that heel. And Tenryu, on the other hand, is just the pop as his music hit at the start was monstrous. It was crazy. And it's just, this crowd, as I said earlier, was great throughout this whole show, but throughout this match, they were insane. Just everything Tenryu did, they went crazy for it. And they booed the hell out of Savage for everything he did as well. But yeah, I really enjoyed this match. Just there was some really cool stuff in here. They had the sort of classic, like, manager hits the babyface with the shoe thing and that whole thing. The crowd hated it, which is perfect. But no, I really enjoyed it. And the finish with that power bomb that Tenryu hit at the end.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I've really seen a power bomb done that way, where rather than holding Savage up in the air, he sort of almost tried to throw him down before Savage was even the whole way up, and it sort of like whiplashed Savage as he was going down. It looked horrible and painful, but you could really buy that as, yeah, Savage is dead after taking that move.
Yeah, I mean, Savage was a tough guy. Like, there is no way of saying it other than that. He was a tough guy. That he grew up, in Memphis. His dad, his brother, the IWC in Memphis, legit called out the usual Mid-South guys like Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee to legitimate fights. Lance Russell, I can't remember who used to commentate with Lance Russell, but they were in a Denny's on the way home from a spot show that they'd been watching, and they turn around and Randy Savage is like pacing from foot to foot, just going, Russell. Russell. And they didn't know what the hell was going to happen. And eventually Randy just turned around and walked away.
What the hell?
Daft thing was, of course, 2 years later when the IWC had run out of business, Randy Savage and Jerry Lawler had a absolutely on-the-top feud that filled the Memphis Coliseum every Monday night for 2 years.
Yeah. It was just... Randy Savage was really something special, and you saw it in this match where he just had the crowd in the palm of his hand.
Yeah.
Like, he knew how to make everything he did just look like the smarmiest, like, scummiest thing. And I don't know, it was, I really enjoyed this match. I thought it was really, really great.
Speaking of great, the WWF Heavyweight Championship match, the Ultimate Warrior defeated Ted DiBiase in 6 minutes and 12 seconds, which in what possibly could be the worst WWF Heavyweight Championship match you will ever see. DiBiase tries his best, himself an All Japan legend, but he's wrestling the Ultimate Warrior. And it's not going to be good, is it? Let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, in my notes for this, the way I summed it up was just, this was a Warrior match.
Yeah, with no variations on the theme either.
No, it was just complete, basic, standard. Warrior gets beat down a bit, makes a comeback, wins. It's just... I mean, the crowd liked Warrior, I guess. They cheered when he did his big comeback at the end, but how long did this match go? Because it seemed like it went about 2 minutes.
6 minutes 12.
Okay, well, maybe I just wasn't paying attention for the first 4 minutes then, but...
Lot of stalling in the first 4 minutes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So...
Well, you could tell because
Ted
DiBiase is one of those guys that when he's going to lose, he telegraphs that he's going to lose. You know, don't get me wrong, I think Ted DiBiase is absolutely amazing, and especially in this time period, he was one of the best workers WWE had. He was just the right guy to carry Hogan at the time they needed him to. He was still on top of his game, but it was still, you know, it was a match he was going to lose. You knew he was going to lose. You could tell by his body language he was going to lose. And I think it was possibly disappointing for a guy who the last time he'd been in an All Japan ring was Stan Hansen's tag team partner. And if I remember correctly, they won the Championship Carnival one year.
Yeah, so it was disappointing, I guess, and it wasn't a great match. I think the best thing about it was before the match, at least on the video that I watched, they had a pre-match sort of, I'll say, quote, promo.
Yeah.
Where they have Warrior backstage with a Japanese sort of interviewer. Warrior is pacing around this room screaming, doesn't say anything, just walks around the room screaming, while the interviewer awkwardly tries to explain what's going on to the commentators. And it was the most awkward, weird, bizarre thing. Just Warriors walking around, screaming, not doing anything, and the interviewer's just there, sort of like, "Yep, this is happening. Not too sure what to say, but here is the Ultimate Warrior."
There you go. Yeah. Now there was some conjecture at the time. Now, let's just take us back a step here. This was in April. Now, the previous month had been Wrestlemania VI, where the Ultimate Warrior defeated Hulk Hogan at the Tokyo. Which one is it in Toronto? What's the Skydome? There you go. The Skydome in Toronto, in front of 60,000 people, one of the biggest WWF shows ever. Hulk Hogan in one of the most heated WWF matches I've ever seen, and still to this day. You know, there are for sheer emotion, there are very few matches you will see that were as good as the Ultimate Warrior versus Hulk Hogan. Not great from a wrestling point of view, but a fantastic story and an incredible spectacle. Don't get me wrong. You know, and there is some conjecture that Vince may not have mentioned this to Giant Baba, that Hogan was dropping the title to the Warrior.
Right, okay.
Which is possibly the reason why, well, it's definitely the reason why this is not the last match on the card.
Yeah, because that would have... Like, the main event was good, but that would have added something to it if Hogan had gone in as the champion. Yeah.
It was certainly, I think you probably would have sell out, definitely. Especially if it was an All Japan guy who was going up against Stan Hansen. And he didn't have to win, you know. That would have been fine.
No, they could have had the exact same match they had just for the title, and it would have really added something to it.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is but again, you know, there was no way Vince McMahon was sticking the Ultimate Warrior with Stan Hansen. In a million years.
No.
Because Stan wasn't going to job to anyone. And quite frankly, he possibly could have killed the Ultimate Warrior. Not literally. Well, I don't know. Maybe. You know, Stan was a tough guy. Stan was... Giant Baba trusted him implicitly. Whether Vince McMahon trusted him implicitly is a different kettle of fish. And when we get to the main event, we'll talk about the politics of the main event when we get there. But there was one non-title tag team match, it says here, because of course were Demolition tag team champions at the time.
I think they were WWF tag champions at the time, but the titles weren't on the line.
Which is
I may be wrong on that.
And it was a sad forbearance to the rest of Axe and Smash's career as they lose to Andre the Giant and Giant Baba in 6 minutes and 39 seconds.
Yeah,
bless them.
This was just basically it was a special attraction match to be able to. Oh, here's Andre and Giant Baba tagging together. Here's the two big guys tagging together, and that was it.
I, to be honest with you, I wouldn't have been surprised if it wasn't Andre the Giant's request, because him and Baba were close friends.
Okay, yeah, maybe that makes more sense. And it was cool to see them tag up, because they just looked just massive against Demolition. It was crazy. But, yeah, I mean, as far as the match goes, it was
all right.
Pretty basic.
Yeah. Sorry, Karen.
I was going to say, I think the finish of the big boot from Baba into the elbow drop from Andre was nice, but everything else was just sort of there.
It was the birth of a fantastic tag team in Andre the Giant and Giant Baba, who went on to the Tag Team Championship Carnival tournament for the next 3 years, I think.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, and we're pretty successful as well. I have actually seen Giant Baba and Andre the Giant versus Doc and Gordy, and you think this is going to be terrible, and it's so not. It's so good.
It's just especially Andre at this time in his career where he was really winding down. You wouldn't really expect him to be able to do much, but I don't know. He does some decent stuff here. He's Andre the Giant, and as you said, they would go on to have much better matches. So yeah.
So Andre, this is one of my favorite Andre the Giant stories. Comes from this time period, maybe a little bit before when he feuded with the Ultimate Warrior. Have you heard this story?
I don't think so.
Bobby Heenan was managing Andre the Giant at the time, and Andre had this spot, and you've seen it in loads of matches, I'm sure, where Andre used to tie himself in the ropes. And he loved doing that spot. It was his favourite spot to do. So he always tried to work it in matches just for him, and he's Andre who's going to argue with him. So the basic principle was Warrior comes off, clotheslines Andre falls backwards into the ropes. And the first night they do it, the Warrior comes off the ropes at 60 miles an hour and slams him with this clothesline. And Andre goes... next night, Bobby goes, this is interesting. Next night, Warrior comes off the ropes, 80 miles an hour, bang. Andre goes. The third night, Warrior comes off the ropes, 120 mile an hour, fast as anyone could possibly run across the ring, and Andre just sticks his fist in his face just as he gets to it. And he looked down at Bobby and he goes, he'll learn.
That's great.
So that was Andre at the time. He was a great wrestling mind. He'd been working for WWE as a booking agent for quite some time by that point as well, though he kind of slowed down his schedule. And he was only really, after this point, we don't see Andre again in the WWE except for a couple of appearances where his career really ends. He just concentrates on Japan and working with his mate Baba and having a great tag team and doing a couple of tours a year. He's an actor. He's a retired gentleman, a ledger, really.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair play to him.
Yeah. And then we have the main event of the evening, Hulk Hogan versus Stan Hansen. Stan the Lariat Hansen. Now, there is a little bit of politics to this match, because the rumour was, at the time, Terry Gordy was booked to be the top gauge in All Japan Pro Wrestling. In fact, he would have a Triple Crown run later that year. And apparently the original idea was for Terry Bam Bam Gordy to wrestle Hulk Hogan in the main event. But Stan Hansen persuaded Gordy, this is all rumours by the way, this has not been corroborated by anyone, but the story is that Hansen persuaded Gordy he shouldn't be doing a job to the former WWF champion on the biggest show of the year, which I think is a perfectly sensible thing for Hansen to say to Gordy, and a perfectly sensible thing for Gordy to think, but it did of course mean that Stan Hansen ended up in the main event of the biggest show of the year. So there was a bit of politics to this match, and I have no problem with that because Stan was awesome, and I do actually think it probably would have hurt Terry Gordy's credibility in the long run because even if he goes and wins the Triple Crown, he still lost to Hulk Hogan in a place where wins and losses truly matter.
Plus, I'd say Stan Hansen this time's the bigger star, and this makes a much bigger box office match. It's unfortunate, as we said, that it isn't for the WWF title, but yeah, it's still a big match, and it was a good match.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this match. It was not your typical Hogan match. They both bleed in this match, don't they? Hansen,
there was a lot of blood in this match.
Yeah.
There was one point where they had a shot of Hansen was beating down Hogan as Hogan was laying on the ground, and it did sort of a close-up, and Hansen's thighs were just covered in Hulk Hogan's blood. It looked really gruesome. But yeah, they were both bleeding quite a lot.
Yeah, and this was also, of course, this was Japanese Hulk Hogan, the better version of Hulk Hogan, not the WWE version of Hulk Hogan. He was trying really, really hard.
This match really shocked me in that Hulk Hogan actually wrestled and wasn't too bad at it. It was really like it starts off with a load of chain and mat wrestling, and Hogan's wrestling really technically, and it's really good. And I'm just like, is this really Hulk Hogan?
Yes,
especially in 1990.
Yeah, this was a strange period of time for Hulk Hogan. We talked about when we did the New Japan in the 70s episode, me and Chelsea talked about Hulk Hogan, and she was mad with me because I made her watch a bunch of Hulk Hogan matches. And she quite rightly said, he's still useless. He's still not any good. Just because he's doing a bit more stuff doesn't mean he's actually that interesting to watch. And it isn't, but, because we're so used to the WWF Hogan of the 1980s, the standard Hogan match, when he wrestles someone who forces him to do something different, and believe me, Stan forced him to do something different. That wasn't his option. Stan persuaded him in quite a violent manner from time to time.
Persuaded.
This was turned out to be really, really different. And Hogan actually looks like he's enjoying himself as well. I don't think he'd not wrestled anyone with that kind of physicality, certainly since he'd left Japan some 5 or 6 years earlier.
Yeah, and I think it really did make for a good match where, as we've said, you had Hogan doing a bunch more stuff than he'd usually do. Hansen is a great sort of heel to go up against him, even though a lot of the crowd were cheering Hansen over Hogan. I don't know if that was just because he was the more familiar face of the two, or whether they're just so scared of Stan Hansen that they just cheered him.
Sorry, we'll get to that in a second. Carry on.
I was just going to say, I really enjoyed this match. It worked really well.
Yeah, I mean, Hansen was an interesting character because he didn't wrestle as a face by any stretch of the imagination, but he was massively popular.
Yeah.
And obviously a lot of that came down from the death of Bruiser Brody. Bruiser and Stan were the tag team in All Japan Pro Wrestling from around about 1983-84 onwards. They were so cool. They were absolutely terrifying as heels. Brody would come down to the ring with a chain and just start swinging. They would just attack people.
Like Hansen on his entrance here, just swinging that rope into the crowd, hitting security guards, hitting fans.
just didn't give a fuck. Honest to God, these guys just did what they did. They had no interest in doing anything else other than what they wanted to do. And it paid off in dividends because the Japanese fans loved them for it. Japanese fans love authenticity. And these authentically look like two absolutely ludicrous mad guys from Texas who are going to come and take your head off.
Because they were.
Essentially, that was their thing. And of course, when Bruiser Brody, for those of you who don't know, Bruiser Brody was killed in a fight in Puerto Rico in not long after, 1988 or
somewhere around that, the late 80s.
In the late 80s, and the day after, I believe 2 days later, Stan Hansen challenged for the Triple Crown, and he dedicated his match to Brody, and broke down in tears. And from that moment on, the fans absolutely adored Hansen. He didn't have to change a thing. He still swung the bull rope. He was still the guy. But because of the death of Brody, the absolutely tragic death of Brody, Hansen was absolutely, he was the made star. And that's when he picked Ted DiBiase as his tag team partner before he went to be the $1 Million Man. And it made DiBiase in All Japan. Just even that association with Hansen. To replace the great Bruiser Brody was one thing. But to be Stan Hansen's partner, that just shows you how big Hansen was and what a big deal Hansen was in that particular time period.
Definitely. I think that's why it worked out that he ended up in this match rather than Terry Gordy.
Yeah, and Terry Gordy arguably would go on to be a bigger star than Hansen was. But, at the time, it was gearing up towards that. Gordy hadn't reached that peak yet, had he?
Yeah, that's true.
Now, the fallout from this show was very interesting. Because not long after this, Genruchi Tenryu and the great Kabuki, who we've talked about a lot today on this card, have a closer working relationship with the WWE than certainly they had done in the past. And eventually they break away from All Japan Pro Wrestling to form Super World Sports, which is a promotion that doesn't last for very long in the greater Japanese industry, but it sets the format for what Tenryu would do as a creative talent and as a booker. And SWS is a company that uses its own talent, a lot of All Japan talent that went with Tenryu, some New Japan talent that left New Japan at the time, some other freelancers and free agents who came towards the company, and had an interesting mix of WWF talent that went on long-term hiatus with SWS. One of those tag teams actually was the Rockers, In fact, one of the best tag matches with the Rockers and the Hart Foundation appears on an SWS show in the Tokyo Dome. And because if you look at Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, the rivalry disc, the WWE documentary series, when they picked the matches, Shawn and Bret picked that Tokyo Dome match as the best Rockers and Hart Foundation match. And if those two think it's the best one,
yeah,
it's got to be the best one, surely. So yeah, it was SWS was a company that was what would become known as Tenryu Kings Road, a style of Kings Road wrestling that Tenryu had picked up from Giant Baba. He relied it very much on the mythology of stables. The Revolution stable that he had pioneered in All Japan Pro Wrestling became his own stable in Super World Sports, and the idea of these stables, guys who were roughly placed together because of style characteristics. So all the shoot style guys were in one group, and he based it on the idea of stables from his days as a sumo. So it really was a massive expression and extension of Tenryu's personality and his ideas and creativity of pro wrestling. So Super World Sports becomes literally a third major overnight because of the talent discrepancy that pulls all of this talent out of All Japan Pro Wrestling. And that's what was known as the first exodus of All Japan. And actually, it did All Japan a bunch of favours, because you take Tenryu out of the equation. Tsuruta is still at the top, but he's on his way down. You've still got Hansen, and then the next group of talent, Toshiaki Kawada, Kenta Kobashi, Steve Williams, Terry Gordy, Teiyu, all of these guys come through and form the great Kings Road era. So this card really is really influential on what happens in Japan over the next 10 to, well, up till now, 27 years later.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy to think about, that you'd have to have some of your top stars leave to create a boom period. It's strange, but like you said, it was because it gave the opportunity for a lot of those younger guys to step up into those main event positions and just have some insane matches throughout the 90s, which we'll go over the next couple of months on this podcast. But yeah, it was ridiculous to see the amount of talent that would be around the Japanese scene from this point onwards.
Yeah, it is quite remarkable, really, how this all fits together. And this becomes part of the wider story. So this card, which is all right, as we've said all night during this recording.
It was, the crowd really helped it a lot, where just having that crowd that was a mix of really excited Japanese fans with a surprising amount of American fans there as well, really created a cool atmosphere that made everyone on this show feel like a massive star. And I'm guessing that's what really helped with the image of Japanese wrestling going forwards, is that in the eyes of American fans who may have heard about this show, even if it was ignored, would have seen them as big stars because they were there with the big WWF stars. And then in Japan, you have these big American stars come over, and your native talent is going head to head with them. It just makes everyone look bigger and better, especially with the reactions they get from this crowd. It just made wrestling look huge at the time, which really helped the scene.
Yeah, definitely. Right then, we're going to have to put a close on this particular episode for today, but we hope you've enjoyed the show. I'd like to thank Mr. Alex Edwards for joining me today and talking about the All Japan, New Japan, WWF Wrestling Summit show at the Tokyo Dome on the 13th of April 1990. If you want to look up the show and watch these matches, I recommend you do, because though it isn't a great wrestling card, and to give you a different opinion, the guys at Cage Match rank it as 5 out of 10. Though it isn't a great wrestling card, it's very important to the history of Japanese professional wrestling. So thank you very much, Alex, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It was good to get to see some of this stuff. And I'd really recommend looking up especially that Temu Savage match and the Hogan Hansen main event. Both those matches were really good, so try and find them if you can.
Yep, you can follow Alex Edwards at Alex_Edwards_ on Twitter. You can talk to him. You can talk to me at Sheriff Lone Star, and you can follow WrestleTalk at WrestleTalk_TV. Also on Twitter, you can listen to the other shows on the WrestleTalk podcast network: The Squash, and Finn Martin's review. They appear on SoundCloud and iTunes as well as us. And also, you can go over to Wrestle Plus and listen to Finn Martin's Wrestling Histories, which is up to episode 22. So if you like shows like this, I would strongly suggest your Wrestle Plus subscription be really good for you to get, because you get the whole of the Finn Martin Wrestling Histories, 22 episodes, well worth a listen. All right, thank you very much for your time. Take care, and we'll be back next week. Bye.